What's up guys, and welcome to 61 Void Knight, the most popular warrior tank sold currently. Void Knight is a utility tank possessing a lot of different things like Purge, Debilitates, Cleanses, a Reflect, and powerful pulls that make it a very valuable tank in most situations. In this guide I'll show you where to put your soul points, which masteries to select, as well as how to play Void Knight, so let's go ahead and get started. Looking at the soul tree breakdown, you'll see we do put the full 61 points into Void Knight. That's specifically because there's a couple of buffs at the bottom that are really important, such as Unstable Void and a Quarter to the Rift. For the secondary soul we go 15 in Paladin. That's because Warrior is pretty unique in that it has more than one tank soul, so going to 15 in Paladin gets you more of the passive soul gifts from the damage done, base health, armor, and resistances, so that's pretty good stuff there. Also for going 15 in Paladin you pick up Aggressive Block, which is a nice little block buff for you. You pick up Retaliation, which is an off global cooldown ability that's triggered by whenever you have a successful block. And you also pick up Light's Balm, which is a small little heal. Not too terribly important, but it's there just in case you need it. As for the third soul, we go 0 in Tempest. That's specifically to pick up Enhanced Conductivity, which gives you a 2% damage increase. Alternatively, you can also swap this to Warlord if you choose for the nice 8-second off global cooldown pull. That's very valuable in a lot of situations as well. But if you're looking to maximize DPS, then Tempest is going to be your best bet. Moving over to the Masteries, level 61, we take Shield Wall. This is going to increase your block mitigation and guard rating from items by 5%, so pretty important stuff there. Level 62, we take Soul Regeneration. This is going to increase the incoming healing by 3%. Another important thing that it does for you, though, is it's going to increase the range of your Reckless Strike, which is your single target builder, to 20 meters, which makes it really easy for disconnects. Level 63, we have Runner's Training. That's going to increase your unmounted movement speed by 10%. And more importantly, it's going to increase the radius of your guard by 3 meters, so that's a pretty big deal as well. Level 64, we take Deliberate Strikes. This is going to be a nice single target damage increase for you. Level 65, we take Power Variation. This is going to be a really strong single target healing cooldown for yourself. However, if you're in an expert dungeon or something like that, and you're not taking a lot of damage, you can alternatively also use it as a really powerful AoE damage cooldown. So there's a dual purpose there. So that's it for the Souls and Masteries, guys. We'll go ahead and talk about macros next. So looking at the macros, there are quite a few that I use. Starting at the top right, left here, we have the single target macro. You'll see we have Cast Reckless Strike and Cast Retaliation. At the top, you also see we have a Cast Shift Devouring Blow. If you're not familiar with shift modifiers, how they work is whatever key you have this on, this particular macro here is on my 1 key. If I press my 1 key, it will first fire off Reckless Strike. If I hold Shift down and then hit my 1 key, it will fire off Devouring Blow. Now, a Devouring Blow is going to be your single target finisher. So what this does for you is it lets you use your builders and finisher in the same macro using a shift modifier. If you don't like that style of gameplay, that's completely okay. You can just move or delete the Devouring Blow line and move it somewhere else on your action bar. As you can see, however, Void Knight has quite a few different skills, but that is totally up to you. So moving on down, for Retaliation, that's your off global cooldown ability that goes in your single target builder macro. That is a form of automation, so that it'll automatically fire off for you. Moving on down, we have the AE macro. This one is going to be pretty similar to the single target macro. You'll have Tempest, Voidstorm, and Ragestorm. These are all cooldown abilities that you get that are AoE for continuing to build your AoE threat. And of course at the top we have another shift modifier here for Unstable Reaction. Unstable Reaction is one of those unique abilities, but we'll talk about that more in just a second when we talk about the action bar. So if you want to do the builders for AoE threat, then you'll just tap this key a few times to cast these abilities. And if you want to use an AoE finisher, then you'll hold Shift down and hit this button, which is on 2 down here. So pretty simple stuff. You'll get to learn more about this in the rotation section. Moving on down, we have an Area of Effect Pull macro. Most of the rest of these macros are all just so that I can name these abilities. There are quite a few utility abilities here, so it is nice to name them in the beginning. After you get familiar with the build, I do recommend that you just delete the wording on it just to clean up your UI. So we have an Area of Effect Pull here, the single target pull, single target debilitate, Area of Effect debilitate, single target purge, and the Area of Effect cleanse macros. And moving over to the third column here, we have our cooldown macros. These are mostly just so I can name them again. So this guy right here is just so you can name it 75% because this is a 75% shield. This one's a 25% shield. This one is a 30% damage reduction, but I also macro in Power Shield, which is a 20% damage reduction and stacks with it. That way you can tap it once for a 30% reduction or twice for the 50% reduction. I'll explain more about that in the playstyle section though. And of course we have a Void Knight K-Alert macro over on the right here, which simply just changes my K-Alert set to match what set I need when I'm playing Void Knight. So that's it for the macros, guys. Let's go ahead and talk about the action bar briefly. So starting at the top left here, we have a Quarter of the Rift. This is great because when you hit this, it casts like 5 different abilities for you, so I'll go ahead and show you that really quick here. Let's get rid of all those. So you just hit this one button, and boom, it puts all 4 of those buffs up for you. And if you look at some of these buffs, a Chord of the Rift increases incoming healing effectiveness by 10% and outgoing damage by 20%. Your Chord of Power increases attack power and weapon contribution by 40% and your block by 5%, so another pretty big one. A Chord of Resilience increases your armor and resistances, your armor by 3% and your resistances by 9%. And your Chord of Shifting, of course, increases your movement speed by 10%, and damage taken from the spells that you take is reduced by 5%. So that's a pretty big buff section there for just one skill. Moving to the right, we have the Unstable Void. If you click that, it's going to apply 2 buffs. It'll apply Unstable Void, which reduces the damage you take by 5% and increases the damage you do by another 20%, while also increasing your base health by 10%. And then you get Void, which reduces the damage done to you by 9%. That's pretty huge. That's almost a 10% reduction with one buff. Pretty big stuff there. And then of course for the third buff, this is the Tempest Enhanced Conductivity buff that you get that increases your damage by 2%. If you do end up taking the Warlord instead of taking Tempest, you won't have this. Instead you'll have Sergeant's Order, which is that pull we talked about previously on 8-second cooldown. So moving over to the right here, these are just a couple of different skills that are here so I can show you the tooltips. So we'll start down here with the cooldowns. On the Z key, we have, this is from Ren of Fate. This is just a shielding trinket. Does about 50k damage. So if you don't have this, not a big deal. You can put something else on the Z keybind for now if you'd like. But I keep my shield there. On the Q keybind, I have the big shield. This is the 75% shield on a 2-minute cooldown. This one's a pretty big one. This is really good for saving your life big time. On the E key, we have the 25% shield. This one's nice because it's a quarter of your life, but it's also on a 45-second cooldown. And one of the main advantages of having this now, since the shielding got nerfed, is that this increases your max shielding capability by 25%. So this is a really good mitigator too, because it allows the Purifier, or whatever class is healing you, probably a Purifier, to put up to a 75% shield on you at any time too. So that's kind of nice. Moving over to the R keybind, we have Protective Shield. This one is going to consume up to 5 packs to reduce damage taken by 6%, so that's 30% damage reduction there. One other note on Rift Shield can also be cast on anyone. It's not just a self only. You can cast this on your party members as well. So moving over to the right, one more here, we have Power Shield. This one will consume up to 5 packs to reduce incoming damage by 4% for 4 seconds. So this is pretty similar to what all tank classes or all tank souls get, is a 20% damage reduction for 4 seconds there. This one's a little bit more unique, however, and it also provides a little bit of a shield to 5 people, so that's pretty cool as well. Moving on to the right, one more, we have another shield. This one's a very small shield on a very big cooldown, so this one right here does not stack with your Rift Shield though. One thing to note, that's the only one it doesn't stack with. So just keep that in mind when you're using it. You don't want to throw this in like a spam macro or anything because it won't stack, it'll be overwritten. But it's nice for a little bit of mitigation there in the beginning if you decide to use it as such. Moving over to the right a little bit more, we have Rift Reversal. This is the Reflect I talk about. It's a spell ability. Attacks made against the warrior are reflected back against the attacker. If you use this as a 3-point finisher, it reflects 3 attacks. There's a very few fights in the game where this thing actually is pretty useful, especially with a 2-minute cooldown, but it does have quite a few uses. Moving over to the X keybind here, we have Aggressive Block. This is from your Paladin tree. It doesn't deal very much damage, but it does increase your block by 3% and increases the damage done by attacks that must follow a block by 5%. And what it's talking about there is that Retaliation that we got from Paladin earlier. This one deals about 9k damage and must be used after the warrior has blocked. But the advantage of this right here is it's off global cooldown, so you can cast it in between other skills, so it's basically free damage. Moving over to the right here, we have Impunity. This is going to be your standard intercept. Intercepts 50% of the damage that the ally receives, replacing the ally's guard with yours for 6 seconds. Pretty straightforward. There's quite a few mechanics in Rift where you have to use this ability. Moving over to the right, one more, we have Spellbreaker. This is going to remove 1 curse. This also applies a pack to you. You can use this once every 10 seconds. We have a standard Break Free right here. If you decide to use this in any capacity or you need it, you can always swap it to your equals key. That's where I usually put it, but I don't typically need it too much when you're tanking. Moving on to the main bar here, we have the 1 key, which is your single target macro. Again, remember, with your single target macro on 1, you'll hit 1 to cast the builders, and you'll hold shift and then hit 1 to cast the single target finisher. On 2, same deal. If you hit 2, it'll cast the AoE builders. If you hit shift and then hit 2, it'll cast your unstable reaction. On 3, we have the single target pull. On 4, we have the single target force taunt. You can label that and make that into a macro if you choose. On 5, we have the AoE force taunt. On 6, we have the single target debilitate. On 7 we have an AoE debilitate. On 8 we have a single target purge. On 9 we have an area of effect cleanse. This one's really nice because if you read it, it creates a field of negative energy which removes 1 buff from up to 5 enemies, so it's a purge as well. But then it also removes 1 poison, curse, or disease from up to 5 allies each second for 3 seconds. So it also cleanses 3 times in 3 seconds. Pretty nice. Moving over to the right, we have on the 0 key, or the middle click key for me. That's what I have it keybound as. This is your interrupt. One thing to note about Furious Rage is that if it is successful, it will debilitate the enemy for 4 seconds. So if you decide to use this for whatever reason, or a variant of this in PvP or something, you can debilitate your enemy with this ability. On the minus key, of course, we have the AE pull, which is Void Summon. Very, very, very useful stuff there. And of course, on the equals key, we have Void Propulsion, which is your standard 15-meter knockback. So pretty good stuff there. That's it for the action bar, guys. If we come up to the top here, you can kind of see I have a couple other abilities laid out. This right here is Discharge. This is a 25-meter builder here on a 5-second cooldown. I typically don't like to use builders that consume packs because you use your packs a lot for a lot of your cooldowns. So if you're in an expert dungeon or something and you're just cruising along not taking much damage, then feel free to use these abilities as much as you want to deal more damage. But if you're in a raid or something and you're needing to use your cooldowns more liberally, you want to be careful with that. You don't want to choke yourself out of the packs because you want to make sure you have them available to use your specific cooldowns. Over to the right, we have the Tempest, we have the Void Storm, and we have Ragestorm. These 3 right here are the ones that are in your Area of Effect Builder macro. I just put them there so you guys can see the tooltips on them, but you'll be able to see, of course, when you build the spec. And over to the right, of course, we have Devouring Blow. This is going to be your single target finisher, which is, again, on your shift 1 for your 1 macro here. So that's it for the action bar, guys. Let's go ahead and talk about K alerts briefly. So there's not very many things that we track, that I track. You can track a lot more. However, I like to keep it pretty simplistic, so we'll go ahead and hit edit layout there. As you can see down on the bottom left here, I have this little pack tracker here. What this does is every time you have, for every 5 packs you have, it'll put a number up. So since I have 10 packs right now, it's telling you, hey, most of your abilities take 5 packs to use. If you use a 5-packed ability, this number will reduce to 1. So how that works, of course, is like, say for instance I was to hit my power shield and use 5 packs, you'd see this pack number go to 5, and you'd see this one go to 1, letting you know, hey, you have 1 more cooldown you can use before you need to regenerate packs. And I'll show you what that looks like when we get to the cooldown usage section as well. Moving up to the top here, we have the aggressive block timer. You want to cast this once every 15 seconds to keep the block percentage up. So it's just like a nice little timer that kind of help you keep track of that. And of course, moving up, we have the negative 30% and negative 20% damage reduction abilities there. Just to track the timers on them, I believe it's like 4 and 5 seconds. But I put them pretty close to the character just so you can kind of monitor how much time you have left before those reductions wear off. So pretty standard stuff there. But that's it for the K alerts, guys. It's not a whole lot there. Pretty straightforward. So now that we talked about the action bar and the K alerts and stuff, let's go ahead and discuss how to play Void Knight. Single target threat with Void Knight is actually pretty straightforward. For the most part, what you'll be doing is building the 3 attack points and using your Devouring Blow finisher while also maintaining aggressive block. You can also throw in Discharge if you aren't taking much damage and won't need the packs to squeeze out a little bit of extra damage. But here's how you do that. So the first thing you want to do, of course, is assess yours and your party's gear and make sure that you're not under geared, because if you are, there's a good potential that some of the DPS in your group could pull aggro off you. If that's the case, what you can do is you can just pop your Spark right in the beginning to give you a nice 3-second buffer to establish that threat threshold. So that's something that I definitely recommend you do, especially while you're learning a build, is just to make sure that you don't have those unnecessary deaths. And this is on a really short cooldown anyway. It's just something you don't want to be in the habit of when you start getting into competitive raiding and stuff, because you want to have these type of abilities, these force taunts, to recover from crazy situations, not just to use in the beginning of the fights. So now that that's said, we'll go ahead and talk about how to do this. So we're actually going to do the rotation as if we are using this force taunt. So the first thing you'll do is you'll target your boss, you'll hit your force taunt, then X for aggressive block, 1 for reckless strike, 1 for reckless strike again, and then shift 1 for the Devouring Blow. And then you're just going to keep mashing your 1 key. Once you get to 3 attack points, you'll do another shift 1. And if you want to, you can add in that discharge there. We'll go ahead and hit another aggressive block, and then use a shift 1. And if you want to, you can continue hitting your discharge for extra DPS, and use 1 to build more combo points, shift 1 to consume with Devouring Blow. And you just keep on going. It's very simple, guys. Extremely straightforward. The single target in this is extremely easy. So we'll go ahead and do the aggressive block to renew. We'll go ahead and use discharge just because, use another 1, and then use a shift 1 for the finisher. Very, very easy to do, guys. Single target threat with Void Knight is extremely simple. But that's it, guys. Now we'll go ahead and talk about AoE threat. AoE threat with Void Knight is slightly more difficult, simply because Void Knights don't get an AoE spam ability like most of the other tanks do. But that said, it's still not very difficult at all to maintain threat on multiple mobs. So in order to start, we'll target the middlemost mob, so we'll just go ahead and pick this guy right here. You have to decide at this point whether you're going to use a Force Taunt or whether you're just going to go straight into your AoE rotation. If you have a lot of trigger happy DPS, I would recommend that while you're starting out that you pop Air Burst or Void Summon just to get them automatically attacking you for the next 3 seconds, which allows you enough time to kind of build your threat threshold there. So if we're going to do that, then the first thing you'll hit is 5 for your Air Burst. After that, you'll pop your Aggressive Block, which is a single target ability. So if you're not using your AoE taunt, do not start with Aggressive Block. Start with your AoE rotation, and then throw Aggressive Block in after your first AoE ability to get that block buff up. So after that, you'll go with your 2 key to hit Tempest. You hit your 2 key again to hit Void Storm, at which point you should be at 3 attack points. And then you use Shift 2 for Unstable Reaction, and you will keep on going. So let's see what that looks like. We're going to go ahead and hit 5 for the Force Taunt, X for Aggressive Block, 2 for Tempest, 2 for Void Storm, and then Shift 2 for Unstable Reaction. And as you can see, using your AoE rotation is going to blow a lot of your packs, so you want to be cognizant of that. So go ahead and hit 2 again for our Tempest, 2 again for Void Storm. And every time we use our Ragestorm, it's going to keep going and use it a bunch of packs. So we're going to go ahead and move to our 1 key for a minute, and then go back and use our Unstable Reaction to gather up all of our packs again. So right after an Unstable Reaction is going to be a really good time to use your cooldowns if you need to. So we're going to keep hitting our 2 again, which is Void Storm, 2 again for Ragestorm. Use Ragestorm again. You can move back to your 1 key if you need to save some packs up just in case you need to use a cooldown. One thing you want to keep in mind while you're doing all this, guys, is that your if you have a T1 trinket, a tank trinket, that doesn't use packs, obviously. Your Fusion of Flesh does not use packs, but your Rift Shield does use 5 packs. Your Protective Shield uses 5 packs, and your Power Shield uses 5 packs. So those are 3 big cooldowns that you have that are going to need 5 packs to reach maximum capacity. So if you're using your AoE rotation for DPS, like I just was there, you're going to be low on packs until you use Unstable Reaction, so you're going to want to kind of plan ahead. If you know you're going to need a lot of cooldowns, you can kind of pop an AoE ability, use a couple of single target abilities, pop another AoE ability, because these guys generate a significant amount of threat, and you also have your Air Burst AoE taunt, and also your Void Summon AoE taunt that will help you recover if you lose one. But other than that, guys, that's all for AoE threat. Now we'll go ahead and talk about cooldown management. So cooldown management is a really important part of playing any tank build in Rift, especially on current tier content. Typically, you always want to try and use the least amount of cooldowns as possible, so you have the most options when things get crazy and you say lose a healer or something drastic like that. With Void Knight, you have quite a few options, so I'll go over a few of the combinations and things that you can do to maximize your build with Void Knight. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is using Protective Shield and Power Shield together. These guys right here is a 30% damage reduction and a 20% damage reduction respectively. You can use them separately if you want to for pretty decent mitigators if you have a really strong healer. However, if you're having issues staying alive during, say, particular 60-second phases or something like that, you can pop this together using RR. So if you hit R twice, it'll pop both of those abilities and you'll have a 50% reduction in damage for about 4 seconds. So that's a really powerful combination. And your 20% damage reduction one, the Power Shield one, will come back in 30 seconds. So you can use that one again. Keep in mind, both of those will use 5 packs, so that'll bring you down to 0 packs. You definitely want to make sure that you're being cognizant of that if you decide to use it in that way. The other one I want to talk about here is a really big one. That's Fusion of Flesh. This is going to be your largest cooldown, doesn't consume packs. This is going to be your lifesaver. Something you don't want to do with this is use this liberally because it's not a 2-minute cooldown. You want to try and be very keep this one in your pocket and make sure that you're not using it unless you absolutely need to do it, because this is the one that's going to help you survive if you have a healer death or something like that. One thing you can do with this guy right here is you can pop this guy and you can pop something like, say, Devouring Shield for a little bit of an extra shield on it, or you can also throw in like a Power Shield with it. However, typically something like that's not needed and you want to try and save those cooldowns for other times. So another combination that you can kind of use if you want to give you a nice little shield is you can use your T1 tank trinket if you have one. They're pretty easy to get nowadays, but this one gives you about says about a 60k shield. So you can pop that, and you can also use your Rift Shield, and that'll give you a really nice combination as well. So you can see here we have like mostly 75% of my health shielded again, and that is also going to increase your max shielding for quite a bit. So until this Rift Shield max health shield buff wears off, that Purifier can put me up to 75% shield for a good 10 or 12 seconds after that shield wears off. So that's another benefit of using those abilities together like that. So something else to keep in mind here is that your Devouring Shield doesn't use packs, but it's only about a 10k shield or so, and the only cooldown it doesn't stack with is your Rift Shield. So if you want to use it in conjunction with some of these other buffs, you can, or if you just want to use it as a mitigator for, you know, small little damaging abilities, you can do that as well. It's pretty malleable on how you use it. You just have to experiment and see what works best for you. Moving over to the right a little bit, we have Rift Reversal. This is going to be a Reflect finisher on a 2-minute cooldown. The only fight that I know that this ability is currently relevant for was Gerloth, I believe. He did an ability, a Boulder ability that did 4 ticks, and this would reflect 3 of them. So that's the only place I know right now that this is extremely great for. But there are probably other places in the game that you can use this ability for. That's pretty cool too. So that's it for the cooldowns. As you can see here, we have quite a few nice ones. There's a couple of different combinations that you can do, but I always recommend that you use the least amount of cooldowns as possible for the situation. One thing you can do if you want to is you can create a Latent Blaze KARUUL alert. And Latent Blaze is the purifier ability that whenever your health dips below 30%, it will trigger and heal you for a lot of health. It's like a life insurance policy basically. So if you have that on you, you know for a fact that if you take a killing blow, it's not actually going to kill you, so you can save your big cooldowns for after something like that triggers, if that makes sense. So that's another really good one to track if you want to create an additional K alert for that. Also, if you look up to the top here, we have Power Variation on a 60-second cooldown. This one right here is an extremely important cooldown as well. It's something that I accidentally deleted earlier in the video. However, it is right here. You can put it on whatever keybind that you choose to. This one right here you can use pretty liberally because it is on a 60-second cooldown and it'll come back quick. One thing you want to keep in mind is that the first tick won't heal you. So you have to wait a full second before it starts healing you. So if you're about to take a killing blow and you just then click this thing, you're probably still going to die. So in that certain situation, you may want to consider using Fusion of Flesh instead of your Power Variation. But you do have a lot of different tools as a Void Knight to survive situations. You also have a crap ton of utility. Look at all this. You have a single target Debilitate, an AoE Debilitate, a single target Purge, an AoE Cleanse that's also a Purge. You also have your Spellbreaker, which removes 1 curse. You have an Interrupt that also is a 4-second Debilitate if it's successful. You have an Area of Effect Pull. You have a Knockback. I mean, you just have all these tools. You can also spec into an 8-second cooldown single target pull if you go 0 in Warlord. So as a Void Knight tank, you have a lot of utility, and a lot of people really love having Void Knights because of that. But that's it, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps out, and I will see you guys next time.